Let's talk about the controversy around Hunter Biden, who's been convicted on all three charges in his federal gun trial. Billionaire Elon Musk has weighed in on the verdict. He responded to this tweet by Republican Thomas Macy, who wrote, "Hunter might deserve to be in jail for something, but purchasing a gun is not it." He then wrote that there are millions of marijuana users who own guns in this country, and none of them should be in jail for purchasing or possessing a firearm against current laws. Now, Elon Musk replied saying, "I agree, he should be in jail, but not for this pseudo crime." Look, that appears to be the view of many Americans. What's your take on the whole situation?
Well, he lied when he was buying a gun while he was under the influence of drugs. And it's not just some drugs. I mean, by this time, he's a crackhead. As you can see at his trial, they brought in all the worst witnesses in the world, the ex-wife, the ex-girlfriend, the kid, and they all said that the guy was on crack, around the clock. And he's spending hundreds of thousands of dollars over a number of years supplying his habit. He's looking like he was talking about himself like he was a career criminal, for God's sakes. And yeah, he does belong. He does deserve a severe sentence here, not because it's a pseudo crime. It's just that let's put it this way. If his name weren't Biden, if he were black or brown or some white trash from Tennessee, he'd be in jail right now. He has spent millions of dollars to avoid this trial, which, by the way, was the worst defendant trial I've ever seen. In fact, I know he was counting on the jury just to acquit him, let him go home. And so, at the end of the day, the president of the United States has a son who is a convicted liar after telling us over and over again, Hunter's done nothing wrong. Well, actually, Hunter did do something wrong. And when you start, and of course, Gabriella, no one's asked the really important question is why did he buy the gun? What was his motivation? Was he trying to go into terrible neighborhoods to buy more crack? Were there threats against his life? I mean, it seems to me that we didn't ask the obvious question is, why does he need a gun at all?
Joe Biden says that he won't pardon his son. There's actually speculation around today that Donald Trump, if he gets elected, will be pardoning Hunter Biden for this. Do you think he will?
No, probably not. But I'll tell you what I see in my crystal ball. Joe Biden is, he knows he's got an election in front of him. He will go to Chicago and he'll take his nomination. And if he wins the election, he will commute his son's sentence. And if he loses the election, he will commute his son's sentence. Or if he steps down and Kamala Harris takes over, she will commute his sentence. I mean, Hunter Biden, as you saw during his trial, didn't look too worried about anything. I mean, he knows he's got the cards. And let's keep this in mind, too. As much as the president looks enfeebled, he is the titular head of one of the most powerful Irish political machines in the United States. In my lifetime, which has seen 14 presidents, there have been a couple great Irish political families. One was the Kennedy family, which ran roughshod over everybody. And then I grew up in Chicago with Dick Daley, who ran Chicago for 20 years, his own way, and did whatever he wanted. And then we got the Bidens in Delaware, which have been running political affairs there, too. And so you can bet they are not going to let Hunter Biden rot in a federal prison so that Joe Biden can say to his dying day that he didn't give Trump supporters a chance to say that I told you so. He will get his kid out of there, and he'll commute the sentence. It doesn't erase the crime, of course. And Hunter's not going to have any trouble getting credit cards or driver's license. He'll get all that back. But I think the president has no intention of leaving him. And even though the president looks slightly senile from time to time, he has moments of clarity. And I am sure that his wife is reminding him. Yes, sure, his wife is reminding him that the kid's not fit for prison.
The Daily Mail is reporting that all of Hunter Biden's adult children are joining President Joe Biden on his trip to Italy to meet with G7 leaders just one day after their father was convicted on federal gun charges. What do you make of this, Joe? Is it a good look, or what does it tell you?
Well, it's just a holiday, isn't it? Look, these G7 things, and I was around when the first one started 1973, I was 29 years old. It was designed to deal with the OPEC crisis in those days about oil. And then it morphed into something else. And of course, there are G7 finance ministers meetings, and there are foreign ministers meetings, and there are heads of government meetings, and there are all these competitions for NGOs and think tanks to put up an agenda. It has now become a cottage industry. And you can always tell that a G7 meeting has no intention of doing anything when they meet in a five-star hotel with a Michelin restaurant. I mean, it's a holiday for these people. You know, it's part of the circuit. I mean, Christ, the guy was just in Europe a couple days ago, and then he goes back and he brings the kids with him. What does he think this is, Dream World? It's supposed to be serious business, and so he brings the kids with him. There's nothing worse than that look.
Look, President Joe Biden is allegedly, or he's supposed to be pushing G7 leaders to hold China and Russia in check while tackling global problems like infrastructure funding and artificial intelligence. Are we likely to see any big outcomes out of this, Joe?
Well, Biden's trying to push the Europeans to accept his plan on either seizing Russian assets, that is, to cash them in, or to take the interest from the assets. And of course, the Europeans are not too crazy about this because, you know, Gabriella, two countries can play the same game. You know, when a lot of these assets are in European banks, and if the Russians want to play hardball with the Europeans, they can freeze their assets. You know, in 1917, the Bolsheviks seized American assets in Russia, and then it took 20 years to unravel the problems that it caused. It's really kind of a non-starter. And of course, Biden is obsessed with Ukraine. And I don't want to shock your viewers, but we have lost the war in Ukraine. It's over. The only person who doesn't know it's over is President Biden. You know, we should be looking for ways to maybe help Ukraine or rebuild it later on. But this idea of trying to give them armaments when we should be offering them diplomatic solutions is ridiculous. And I tell you what Joe Biden's doing is not going to save one life in Ukraine between now and when the conflict ends. And of course, all Biden wants to do, Gabriella, is to keep the loss of Ukraine out of the news until the election is over. He's obsessed with that. And you notice how he hangs around Zelensky.
Is that why he's obsessed with it? Because the election's coming up? Or in your view, why is he, as you say, obsessed with Ukraine?
Well, he's trying to push it into the weeds until the election's over. I mean, he can't have an election where people say he lost Ukraine. When I was a kid, people used to say that presidents lost China, they lost South Vietnam, they lost Iran, and all the rest of it. That's the kind of game that politicians play after they've lost a war. Look, the Russians are going to win this war. They've worn them down. And, you know, as I've said day one, President should have used all his diplomatic power to try to stop this from happening. And of course, he didn't call Putin. He hasn't called him during the course of the war, but he's met Zelensky on numerous occasions, offered him everything but American troops, and offering him all this kind of hope. And you know, the president's attachment to this character just strikes me as incredibly odd. You know, he gives him whatever he wants, and Zelensky ain't all that popular at home because, after all, he is losing the war. They've lost a lot of men, and they've lost a lot of infrastructure. In fact, if you look very closely at Ukraine, it looks like it's been pulverized by Russian artillery, which it has, as a matter of fact. So we should be looking for a decent end for this war. And look, I have no problem in defending your territory. But when you are defeated and the enemy's all around you, you know, what chance does Ukraine have against a nation that has 11 time zones? Zero. We should have known how this was going to turn out. And look, I think to ask Ukrainians to fight to the last man for American or European objectives is a bit much. And of course, the Europeans are scared to death that the United States will turn their back on them. And if President Trump returns in November, that's what he's going to do. When he says he'll bring that war to a close, what he means is there's no more armaments going that way. And of course, half the American people believe that the time has come to stop arming Ukraine and to bring the war to a conclusion.
Professor Joe Siracusa, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Okay, thank you.